From a distance, all the houses on the block looked the same, but everyone who lived there knew better. They knew which homes felt safe, which ones held warmth, and which ones always seemed to let the cold in. Claire's house was one of those. The front door had warped over the years, a casualty of changing seasons and a lack of care. The lock was stubborn, and no matter how hard she pulled, it never seemed to close completely. It left a sliver of an opening, just enough for the wind to whistle through, just enough for her fears to creep in. Every night, she checked it twice, pushing her weight against it, jiggling the handle until it felt as secure as it was going to get. And every night, after she'd tucked her daughter Winnie into bed, she'd lie awake, listening to the house settle, imagining the worst. Fear was a constant, unwelcome roommate. Down at the end of the street lived Nathan. His house was the opposite of Claire's. Everything was neat, clean, and in its proper place. He lived a quiet life, a controlled life. The lawn was always mowed, the windows were always clean, the porch light always worked. As they passed Nathan's house, he was outside, sweeping his porch. Before Claire could steer her away, Winnie, with the unfiltered honesty only a child possesses, broke free. She walked right up to the quiet man, looked up at him with her wide, trusting eyes. The words hung in the chilly air. Claire's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and humiliation. She rushed forward, grabbing Winnie's hand. Standing on her porch, soaked by the pouring rain, was Nathan. In his hand, he held a toolbox. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly, carefully, opened the door as far as it would go. He worked in the pouring rain, his focus absolute. Claire stood in the doorway, holding a flashlight to help him see. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating his hands as they moved with quiet efficiency. He was patient, methodical, treating the old, warped wood with a strange kind of reverence. At one point, seeing him drenched, Claire wordlessly opened an umbrella and held it over him, shielding him from the worst of the downpour. It was a shared silence, but this time, it wasn't empty. It felt like a conversation without words. When he was finished, he tested it. Solid, secure, no draft, no rattle. Claire pushed on it, and it didn't budge. A wave of relief, so profound it almost made her dizzy, washed over her. Something deep inside her, a knot of tension she had carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there, finally began to release. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan just nodded, packing his tools. "Everyone deserves a door that closes right," he said softly, and then he turned and walked back into the storm, leaving her with a closed door and a feeling she hadn't experienced in years: safety. When Claire and Winnie came home late, their porch light was already on, a beacon in the dusk. After a particularly long shift at work, Claire would sometimes find a neatly wrapped sandwich left on her doorstep. One day, a brand new, high-security lock appeared in a box by the door. No note, no explanation needed. It wasn't a grand gesture, but a series of small, steady acts of kindness. Trust, like a cautious flower, began to grow in the space between their two houses. The silence between them was no longer one of distance, but of comfortable understanding. One evening, the familiar comfort was shattered. The power grid for the entire neighborhood went out, plunging every house into sudden, complete darkness. Claire's first instinct was to check the doors. As she reached the back of the house, she heard the distinct, terrifying sound of someone jiggling the lock on the back door. He looked at her, his expression calm and steady. He wasn't there to fight her battles. He was just there. "You didn't do anything wrong by being scared," he called out to her, his voice cutting through her panic. That night, he didn't go home. He sat on her porch until the power came back on, not to rescue her, but simply to be a presence. A quiet reminder that she didn't have to be strong all by herself. The days turned into months. The quiet acts of service slowly evolved. Repairs to the house turned into shared projects. Shared projects turned into shared meals. Shared meals turned into shared laughter. The fear that had once been a permanent resident in Claire's heart began to soften, replaced by a growing sense of peace. She found herself breathing easier, smiling more freely. Winnie, who had once called him Mr. Fix-It, eventually dropped the formality. One afternoon, as he helped her with a puzzle, she looked up and called him Dad. The word, so simple and natural, settled in the air, and it just felt right. One day, Nathan handed Claire a folder. Inside were documents, deeds, and titles. He had bought the house. He wasn't giving it to her. That wasn't his way. It was a choice, a foundation for them to build upon. He was giving her stability, the one thing she had craved for so long. A year later, another storm came. A familiar echo of the one that had first brought him to her door. A particularly strong gust of wind blew the front door wide open with a loud crack. But this time, there was no fear. Winnie just laughed and ran towards it. "Daddy, the door is broken again," she yelled with delight. Nathan smiled, scooping her up into his arms. "Then we fix it," he said, kissing her forehead. Together. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the house stood firm. It was warm, it was steady, and it was full. A door that was once a symbol of fear and vulnerability now guarded a home. A home built not with wood and nails, but with trust, patience, and love. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more content just like this.